Be me, 32, IT worker at a massive personality-free corporation. Be not me, Skylar, my wife for the last 5 years. For a long time, I figured we'd reach the version of life people aim for. Modest house outside the city, 2 cars in the driveway, kids maybe somewhere down the road. My routine was simple: work my hours, keep the finances steady, come back home, and try to show up as the kind of husband she deserved. That routine felt like my entire orbit. Then, over the last year, things began drifting. Not dramatic at first, just small shifts. Skylar started spending a lot of time reading certain blogs and hanging around new online circles. Every night she'd be glued to her laptop, scrolling through forums and articles. The vocabulary started to shift. Suddenly everything was about systemic issues and the patriarchy. Our quiet evenings turned into lectures I never signed up for. I'd come home from a 10-hour day, wanting to just relax and watch a movie. She'd have a documentary queued up about something I'd never heard of. I'd try to talk about my day, and she'd somehow link my stressful meeting with a manager to ingrained male toxicity in the workplace. I'm not an idiot, I get that the world has problems, but it felt like I was living with a full-time activist, not a partner. She stopped wanting to do the things we used to enjoy. Hiking? The trails are named after problematic historical figures. Going to our favorite diner? It perpetuates a harmful 1950s domestic fantasy. It was exhausting. I found myself just agreeing with everything to avoid a fight. Yes, dear. You're right, dear. I took over most of the chores because she was always doing important research or was too drained from carrying the emotional labor of our relationship. I cooked, I cleaned, I did the laundry, I took out the trash. I just wanted peace. I thought it was a phase that she'd eventually get tired of being angry all the time. I was wrong. The beginning of the end came on a totally normal evening. I was making spaghetti, her favorite. She walked into the kitchen, not even looking at me, just staring at her phone. She announced that her women's empowerment circle was having a weekend retreat and she needed to go. I just said, "Okay, have fun." She looked up, and I could see the disappointment in her eyes. I think she wanted me to argue, to be the controlling husband from her articles, so she could have a real-life example to share with her friends. But I was too tired to care. She was gone for the whole weekend. The house was quiet. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. I watched dumb action movies, ate pizza on the couch, and didn't have to listen to a single lecture. It was bliss. But it was also the calm before the storm. She came back on Sunday night looking like she'd made a huge decision. She had that look of someone who had practiced a speech in the mirror 100 times. She told me to sit down at the kitchen table. My heart sank. I knew this wasn't going to be about what to have for dinner tomorrow. She started talking, using all the buzzwords. She said she was on a journey of self-discovery, that our marriage, no matter how much I tried, was a cage built by patriarchal expectations. She needed to deconstruct her life and find her authentic self. I just sat there, listening to this stranger who looked like my wife. I asked her, "What does that even mean, Skylar? What do you want?" My voice was quiet. I wasn't yelling. She said she wanted a divorce. The word just hung in the air. Divorce. I felt my stomach drop to the floor. 5 years, just gone. I tried to reason with her. I asked for specifics. What did I do wrong? Was it something I said? Is there something I can fix? She just shook her head. It wasn't about me, she explained, as if that was supposed to make it better. It was about her breaking free from a system that I represented. I was just a symbol of her oppression, my job, my gender, my desire for a simple, happy life. It was all part of the problem. I realized then that I couldn't win. I was arguing with an ideology, not a person. The woman I married was gone, replaced by this angry slogan-spouting avatar. So I just said, "Okay." Again, that flicker of disappointment on her face. She really wanted a fight. She wanted me to yell, to break things, to prove her theories about male rage right. My quiet, defeated acceptance was the one thing she wasn't prepared for. It invalidated her entire narrative. The next 2 weeks were a blur of cold logistics. She moved out fast. Her friends, a gaggle of women who all had the same haircut and talked in the same therapeutic jargon, came over with a U-Haul. They moved through the house like a team of professional looters. They took the good couch, the new TV, the coffee maker I bought. They packed up all the art from the walls, even the pieces my sister had painted for us as a wedding gift. I just stood in the corner of the living room and watched. I didn't have the energy to fight over a lamp. Skylar directed the whole operation with a clipboard, like a general commanding an army. Before she left for the last time, she stood in the doorway. She told me she hoped one day I would do the work and understand why this had to happen. She said she felt sorry for me, trapped in my own unexamined privilege. Then she left. The door clicked shut, and I was alone in a half-empty house that echoed with silence. The first month was pure hell. Every object in the house was a memory. I'd open a cupboard and see the one weird-shaped mug she loved, which she'd somehow forgotten to take. I'd walk past the room she had used as her office and see the faint outlines on the wall where her corkboard of inspirational quotes used to hang. I barely ate. I lost weight. I'd go to work, come home, stare at the wall, and go to sleep. Repeat. I felt like a ghost in my own life. I felt betrayed, not just by her, but by the whole idea of what we were building. I did everything I was supposed to do. I was supportive, I was faithful, I was a provider. And in the end, I was thrown away because I didn't fit into a new political identity she found on the internet. It felt like the ultimate injustice. I saw her posts on social media through a mutual friend's account. Pictures of her and her friends doing full moon rituals and going to brunch. Captions full of hashtags. Hashtag divorce. Diaries hashtag healing journey. Hashtag finding me. Hashtag unapologetic. She was painting a picture of a brave woman escaping a toxic situation. I was the unspoken villain in her heroic story. The loneliness was crushing. It felt like I had failed at the most important thing in my life. The turning point came on a Saturday afternoon. I hadn't left the house in 2 days. My phone rang. It was an old friend, a guy named Mark. I hadn't seen him much in the last couple of years, because Skylar decided he was a bad influence. In reality, he was just a normal guy who liked fishing and football. I almost didn't answer, but I did. He didn't even say hello, just, "You sound like you're in a cave. I'm coming to get you." I tried to make an excuse. "I'm tired. I'm busy." He cut me off. "I'll be there in 15 minutes. Put on shoes." He hung up. Mark showed up and basically dragged me out of the house. He didn't ask a bunch of sensitive questions. He didn't try to psychoanalyze me. He just took me to the gym. I hadn't been in a gym since college. I was weak, out of shape. The first workout was miserable. Every muscle screamed. But as I was leaving, dripping with sweat and barely able to lift my arms, something felt different. For the first time in a month, the fog in my head had cleared just a little bit. I had been so focused on what I'd lost that I forgot I still had myself. That trip to the gym became a routine. Mark and I started going 3 times a week. It was brutal at first. I was embarrassed by how little I could lift, but I kept showing up. Slowly, I started to see changes. I had more energy. I was sleeping better. The guy I saw in the mirror started to look less like a sad ghost and more like a person. The physical pain of the workouts was a welcome distraction from the emotional pain. I started focusing on what I could control, how much weight I could add to the bar, how many more reps I could push out. It was simple. It was tangible. It was real. The progress was addictive. With the physical change came a mental one. I started thinking about all the other things I had given up for my marriage. One weekend, I went into the garage. In the back, under a dusty tarp, was my old guitar. I hadn't played it in years. Skylar always complained it was too loud, that my strumming was aggressive. I pulled it out, wiped it down, and tuned it up. My fingers were clumsy on the frets. The calluses were long gone, but the muscle memory was still there. I sat on my back porch and played until my fingertips were raw. I played old songs that reminded me of being a teenager, full of stupid, hopeful energy. It felt like reconnecting with a part of myself I thought was dead and buried. I started reconnecting with other old friends, the ones Skylar had pushed away. We went on a fishing trip, something I hadn't done since before I met her. We sat by a lake for hours, not saying much, just enjoying the quiet. Nobody mentioned Skylar, nobody gave me pitying looks. They just treated me like me. It was like I was slowly reassembling my own life, piece by piece. The house started to feel less empty and more like my own space. I bought a new couch, a big, comfortable leather one that Skylar would have called aggressively masculine. I hung up posters of my favorite bands and movies. I filled the house with my own things, my own personality. The divorce was finalized in a quick, sterile meeting with lawyers. She got what she wanted from the assets. I didn't fight it. I just wanted it to be over. I wanted to close that chapter for good. I signed the papers, and when I walked out of that building, I didn't feel sad. I felt light. It was around this time, maybe 4 or 5 months after she left, that I started to feel genuinely okay. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was actually living. I had a routine: work, gym, guitar, friends. I wasn't even thinking about dating. The idea of letting someone into my life like that again was terrifying. I was just focused on myself. My friends tried to set me up a few times, but I always said no. I was happy with my own company. I was rediscovering what I liked, who I was, without someone else's opinions filtering everything. One day, Mark convinced me to go with him to a local street fair. There was live music, food trucks, the whole thing. I almost said no, but the weather was nice, and I didn't have any other plans. So I went. We were standing near one of the smaller stages, listening to some local band play blues rock. I wasn't paying much attention to the crowd. Then someone next to me laughed at something the singer said. It was a nice laugh, genuinely happy. I glanced over. It was a woman, probably around my age. She had a kind face and a bright smile. She caught me looking and smiled at me. I felt that old, familiar jolt of anxiety. My first instinct was to look away, to retreat back into my shell. But then I thought, what's the worst that can happen? So I smiled back. We stood there for a minute, just listening to the music. Then, during a break between songs, she turned to me. "They're pretty good, aren't they?" she said. Her voice was as warm as her smile. I was rusty. I hadn't had a casual conversation with a new woman in years. But I managed to say something that wasn't completely stupid. "Yeah, the guitarist is amazing." We started talking. Her name was Lily. The conversation was easy, effortless. We talked about the band, about other music we liked, about the ridiculously overpriced tacos from the food truck. There was no agenda, no hidden meaning in her questions. She wasn't trying to figure out what my job was or what kind of car I drove. She just seemed interested in the conversation. Mark eventually noticed and gave me a little nod before wandering off to get a beer, leaving us alone. Lily told me she was a vet tech. She talked about the funny things her dog did. I found myself talking about my guitar, about my recent fishing trip. I mentioned I was divorced. I said it matter-of-factly, not looking for sympathy. Her reaction was perfect. She just nodded and said, "I'm sorry you had to go through that. It sounds tough." That was it. No follow-up questions about what went wrong. No, what's her side of the story? Just simple human empathy. After the band finished their set, the crowd started to break up. I felt a pang of disappointment. I didn't want the conversation to end. I took a leap of faith. The new me, the guy who goes to the gym and plays guitar, took over. "Hey, I know this is forward," I started, my heart pounding a bit. "But would you be interested in getting a coffee sometime?" She smiled that bright smile again. "I'd like that a lot," she said. She put her number in my phone. We said goodbye, and I walked back over to Mark with a stupid grin on my face. He just clapped me on the shoulder. I texted her the next day. We met for coffee that week. Coffee turned into a long walk in the park. The walk turned into dinner a few days later. Being with Lily was like a breath of fresh air. She was so normal, in the best possible way. She was kind, funny, and down to earth. She had her own life, her own interests, her own friends. She wasn't looking for someone to complete her or save her. She was just looking for a partner. She thought it was cool that I played guitar. She even asked me to play for her once, and she actually listened. She loved that I liked to cook. One night, I made her the same spaghetti I had been making the night Skylar announced the divorce. As I was serving it, I had a brief, weird flashback. Lily took a bite, and her eyes lit up. "This is the best spaghetti I've ever had," she said, and she meant it. In that small moment, a huge weight I didn't even know I was still carrying just lifted. We took things slow. I was cautious. I was terrified of getting hurt again. But Lily was patient. She never pushed. She was just there, consistent, reliable, kind. My life, which had been a black hole of misery just a few months prior, was suddenly full of light. My friends loved her. Even Mark, who was naturally suspicious of everyone, said, "Don't mess this one up, Milo. She's a good one." Life fell into a new happy rhythm. We'd go hiking on weekends. We'd cook together. We'd go to concerts. All the simple, normal things I had missed so much. She never once used the phrase emotional labor or talked about the patriarchy. If something was bothering her, she just told me, directly. And we'd talk about it like two adults. It was a revelation. I was happy, genuinely, deeply happy. I had rebuilt my life from the ashes, and it was better than it had ever been before. I almost never thought about Skylar anymore. She was just a character from a past life, a story that felt like it had happened to someone else. I had no idea what she was up to, and I didn't care. I assumed she was off somewhere, living her best, authentic, empowered life. I was about to find out just how wrong I was. A few more months rolled by, and life with Lily was better than I ever thought life could be. It was the little things. The way she'd leave a stupid doodle on a sticky note on the bathroom mirror for me to find in the morning. The fact that she would listen, really listen, when I talked about a frustrating day at work, instead of trying to fit my experience into a political framework. We got into a routine that felt comfortable, not confining. We'd hike on weekends, exploring new trails. She never once complained about the names of the parks. She actually enjoyed being outdoors, feeling the sun and the dirt. We'd cook dinner together, our shoulders bumping in my small kitchen, with music playing in the background. It was a partnership, not a list of duties. One evening, I was sitting on the porch, playing my guitar. She came out with 2 beers and sat on the steps, just listening. When I finished the song, she didn't clap or give fake praise. She just looked at me with this soft expression and said, "It's really nice to see you so happy doing that." And that was it. That was everything. She saw me. The real me. Not a symbol, not a stand-in for a concept, just me. I felt a sense of peace that I hadn't realized was even possible. The house was no longer a half-empty shell full of ghosts. It was a home again. Our home. I had completely put my past behind me. Or so I thought. The confrontation happened on a Saturday morning. It was one of those perfect, boring, happy days. Lily and I were at the grocery store, the big one we always went to. We were in the produce section, debating whether we were ambitious enough to try and make a fancy artichoke dip we saw online. I was holding 2 artichokes, pretending they were puppets and making them argue with each other in stupid voices. Lily was laughing so hard she was leaning against the cart. That's when I saw her. It was like the record scratched in my brain. Skylar. She was standing near the packaged salads, a few aisles away. She looked different. The vibrant, self-righteous energy was gone. Her hair was messy, pulled back in a way that looked tired, not effortlessly chic. She was wearing worn-out leggings and an oversized, faded hoodie. She looked thin and pale. There were dark circles under her eyes. She was just staring at her phone, her face a blank mask of exhaustion. A million thoughts raced through my head. I should turn the cart around. We should just leave. But we were frozen. Lily had stopped laughing and was looking at me, her expression concerned. I gave her a small, tight nod. "It's okay," I whispered. Before we could move, Skylar looked up from her phone, her eyes scanning the aisle, and then they locked onto mine. For a second, there was nothing, just blank confusion. It was like her brain couldn't process what it was seeing. Me, standing there, laughing, with another woman. Then, recognition dawned, and it was followed by a wave of something I couldn't quite read. Shock, anger, hurt. She straightened up, her posture changing immediately. The tired woman disappeared, replaced by the defensive, prickly person I remembered. She started walking towards us. My stomach twisted into a knot. This was the last thing I wanted. Lily gently put her hand on the small of my back, a silent show of support. "Milo," Skylar said. Her voice was strained. "Hey, Skylar," I replied, keeping my own voice as neutral as possible. "How are you?" The most pointless question in the world. Her eyes darted from me to Lily, then back to me. A quick, judgmental up-and-down sweep of what Lily was wearing. Jeans and a simple t-shirt. "I'm fine," she said, though she clearly wasn't. "I'm on my journey." She said it like it was a grand spiritual quest, not a life of quiet desperation. "This is Lily," I said, gesturing to my side. Lily gave a small, polite smile. "Hi, nice to meet you." Skylar didn't return the smile. She just gave a curt nod. An incredibly awkward silence fell over the produce section. People were trying to get around our three-person roadblock. "So you're shopping," Skylar said, stating the obvious. It was an accusation, not an observation. "Yeah, just grabbing a few things," I said, trying to end the conversation. But she wasn't done. She looked at our cart, which was full of fresh vegetables, some nice cuts of meat, a bottle of wine. It was a cart full of a happy life. I saw her glance down at her own basket. It had a frozen pizza, a container of instant noodles, and a bottle of cheap energy drink. Her face tightened. "It's good to see you've moved on," she said, and the words were dripping with a weird mix of sarcasm and genuine pain. The narrative she had built in her head, the one where I was a lost, pathetic man-child who couldn't function without her, was crumbling right in front of her eyes. I was supposed to be miserable. I was supposed to be begging her to come back. I was not supposed to be here, looking healthy and happy with a beautiful, kind woman by my side. "I'm happy, Skylar," I said simply. "I hope you are too." That seemed to break her. Her defensive shell cracked. "Happy?" she scoffed, her voice rising slightly. "How can you be happy? Did our 5 years mean nothing to you?" A few people in the aisle were starting to look over. This was my worst nightmare. A scene. Lily's hand squeezed my back gently, reminding me to stay calm. "Our 5 years meant a lot to me," I said, keeping my voice low. "But you're the one who ended it. You told me to move on, so I did." Her eyes welled up with tears. The angry activist was gone, replaced by a confused, hurt woman. "I thought you'd at least wait," she whispered, as if that made any sense. "I thought you cared." "I did care," I said. "But I also care about my own life. You made your choice, and I had to make mine." She just stared at me, her mouth slightly open. There was nothing left to say. Her entire worldview had been shattered in the span of 2 minutes next to the avocados. "Well," I said, taking the handle of the cart, "we should get going. It was seeing you, Skylar." I didn't wait for a reply. I just pushed the cart past her, Lily walking closely beside me. I didn't look back, but I could feel her eyes on my back all the way down the aisle. We didn't speak again until we got to the checkout. My hands were shaking a little. Lily put her hand over mine on the cart handle. "Are you okay?" she asked softly. I took a deep breath. "Yeah, I think so. That was just a lot." "She seemed very unhappy," Lily observed, without a hint of satisfaction in her voice. Just a sad statement of fact. "Yeah," I said. She did. And for a brief moment, I felt a flicker of pity for Skylar. But then I looked at Lily, at her kind, worried face, and the pity vanished, replaced by an overwhelming sense of gratitude. I had escaped, I had survived, and I had found something real. I thought that would be the end of it. Another ghost from the past, seen and then gone. But a few days later, I got a text. It was from a number I didn't recognize, but I knew who it was immediately. "Hey, it was weird seeing you the other day." I stared at the message for a full minute before showing it to Lily. "What should I do?" I asked her. She read it and shrugged. "You don't have to do anything. You don't owe her a conversation." She was right, so I ignored it. 2 days later, another one came through. "I've been thinking a lot about us. Maybe I was confused back then. I was getting a lot of bad advice." This one annoyed me, blaming her friends now, taking no responsibility. The classic move. I deleted it without a second thought. The texts kept coming. Every day or two, a new little probe. "Remember that time we went to the lake? I saw a picture from that trip the other day. I drove past our old house. It looks good. You're taking good care of the garden." It was a campaign. She was trying to worm her way back into my head. Then, about a week after the grocery store incident, I got a call from another mutual friend, a woman named Karen. We hadn't been close, but she was always nice enough. We were still connected on a social media site I rarely used. I answered, curious. "Milo, hi, it's Karen. Do you have a minute?" She sounded awkward. "Yeah, what's up?" "Look, this is really weird, but I just had a very long, very tearful phone call with Skylar, and I don't know. I feel like you deserve to know what's actually been going on." I sat down. "Okay, I'm listening." And then Karen laid it all out. Skylar's empowering journey of self-discovery had been a complete and utter disaster from day one. The apartment she moved into with her friend lasted about 2 months. They had a massive fight because Skylar wasn't paying her share of the bills, and the friend kicked her out. She had been bouncing between sublets and crashing on couches ever since. Her job as a part-time barista wasn't enough to cover her expenses. She was apparently deep in credit card debt. Her dating life was a wasteland. Karen said Skylar complained constantly. The men she went out with were either emotionally unavailable chads who just wanted one thing, or boring losers who didn't understand her. Apparently, her go-to first date conversation topic was deconstructing male toxicity in modern relationships. It was not, as Karen put it, a hit with the guys. She had pushed away most of her old pre-activist friends, and her new empowerment circle friends. They had scattered to the winds. Karen said they were a group of perpetually online, miserable people who fed off each other's negativity. Once Skylar's life became a real, tangible mess, they weren't interested in helping. They were just looking for the next outrage to be angry about. "She's completely alone, Milo," Karen said, her voice full of pity. She built her whole identity around this ideology, and when it failed to make her happy, she was left with nothing. The final nail in the coffin was seeing me in the grocery store. According to Karen, Skylar had a complete meltdown after that. She had convinced herself that I was pining for her, that I was just waiting for her to finish finding herself, so I would welcome her back with open arms. Seeing me happy, healthy, and with someone new and normal had shattered her entire reality. She kept saying, "He was supposed to be the broken one," Karen told me. It was honestly kind of scary to hear. I thanked Karen for telling me and hung up the phone. I wasn't happy to hear about her misery, but I wasn't sad either. It was like hearing about the fate of a character in a book I'd finished long ago. It was just information. It confirmed what I already knew. You can't build a life on anger and resentment. That night, the final text from Skylar arrived. It was a long paragraph. "Milo, I made a terrible mistake. I see that now. I let other people's voices get in my head. I wasn't thinking clearly. The life we had was good. I was good. You were good. I miss you. I miss us. Can we please just talk? I know we can fix this. I've grown so much, and I realize now that you were always the one for me." I read it once, then I read it again. There was no real apology, no ownership of the pain she caused. It was all about her, her mistake, her realization, what she wanted. It was the most selfish message I had ever read. I showed it to Lily. She read it and looked at me. "What do you want to do?" And for the first time, the answer was crystal clear. There was no doubt, no hesitation. I knew exactly what I had to do to protect the new life I had built. I opened my phone and typed out a reply. My hands were steady. My mind was calm. "Skylar, I'm glad you're doing some self-reflection. I truly hope you find what you're looking for. But my life has moved on. I am in a happy, healthy relationship with someone I love. The chapter of my life with you in it is closed. Please respect that and do not contact me again. I wish you the best." I hit send, then I blocked her number. I blocked her on every social media platform I could think of. A wave of relief washed over me. It was over. For real this time. Lily put her arms around me from behind and rested her chin on my shoulder. We just stood there in the quiet of our kitchen for a long time. A few weeks later, I heard through the grapevine that Skylar had moved out of state, back to her parents' house. I never heard from her or about her again. Life went on, and it was good. Lily and I moved into a new place together a year later, a place that held no memories of my past life. We adopted a goofy three-legged dog from the shelter where she sometimes volunteered. My life isn't a grand adventure. I'm not a hero in some epic story. I'm just a guy who goes to work, comes home, plays his guitar, and loves his girlfriend and his dog. I found out that the happiness I was always looking for wasn't in grand gestures or dramatic pronouncements. It was in the quiet moments. It was in a shared laugh over a stupid joke. It was in the comfortable silence of two people who just enjoy being in the same room. I had to lose everything to figure out what was actually important. I had to be broken down to my foundation so I could rebuild myself into someone stronger. Skylar thought she was escaping a cage, but she was the one who built her own prison out of buzzwords and ideology. I'm the one who's truly free.